Greetings, gamers, ghosties, and campers. And tonight I'm bringing you a little bit of a different story. It's not so much tales from a ghost hunter, because it's not really me ghost hunting. Years ago, I used to be a security guard, and one of my jobs was at a government facility that was haunted. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. Now, I'm not going to say the name of the facility, just in case for some reason they still don't want me to say the name of it. But it was a government facility. Basically, it was for, it was kind of a government retreat for officials and like senators, congressmen, dignitaries, and whatnot. And when I became a security guard there are already stories about the place. It was built on an old Civil War plantation, so it had multiple buildings. It had a main facility that was the new building that housed the staff, like cleaning services, security, and whatnot. And but the older buildings, you had like an old manor house, you had an old mansion, and you had a bunch of individual smaller buildings, and even quarters for servants. Of course, back in Civil War days, we know they weren't exactly willing servants, but I don't know if YouTube will not like that word, so I'm not going to use it. Now, I'm going to tell you some of the stories I heard about security guards before I went to work at the facility. There was a woman, a female security guard, one night. She was apparently doing a patrol in the main house, the manor house, and the supervisor at the security building got a call from her saying that he needed to come down because she had locked the keys in the main house. Now, when he got there, she was supposedly white as a ghost, no pun intended, shaking, and was refusing to go back into the house. Now, when the supervisor got there, she said, "Now that you're here, I quit." She didn't say what she encountered or saw or what frightened her so much, but she had apparently run out of the main house, locked the keys in the house. Now that the supervisor was there, he could go in and get them, and there was somebody there on site. So whatever it was had her pale, shaking, and refusing to go back to work. And unfortunately, she never said what it was. Now, another person, another male security guard this time, unfortunately I never got any of their names because they had quit before I had got hired there. But this guy, apparently it was his first weekend there, and he had encountered something in the main house. He was being shown the patrol by his supervisor, and in the main house they have these stairs that kind of curve up to the second floor, and there's no floor there. It's an opening that you can look down on from the second floor, kind of like a balcony indoors that goes into hallways, that goes into separate rooms in the second floor. Well, anyway, they had patrolled the second floor already. They were getting ready to go down the steps that were curving down when he and his supervisor heard something at the bottom of the stairs. Now, they had the lights on, they had their flashlights and everything, and they could see just fine. So, as they were going down the stairs, at the bottom of the stairs, they heard a woman's voice say, "Who is that?" And they heard a male voice respond saying, "Darling, don't fret so." Well, that's all they heard, but where they heard it from was at the bottom of the stairs, and according to them, they didn't see anything at the bottom of the stairs. There was nothing there. All they heard were voices. Now, unfortunately for this poor guy, after that night, he turned in his keys and his equipment. Apparently, he was crying. He was scared that bad. And he just told the commanding officer, he's just like, "I can't do this." And he quit. Now, while I was a security guard there, I had talked with some of the maid staff, the cleaning staff. They had stories of their own as well. They told of, in that main building again, the main building seemed to have been the most haunted building. And they told me stories of when they went in and changed sheets on the beds after someone had stayed there. They would come back into the room to get something else, and they swore up and down the sheets looked like there was blood on them. Well, they would take them off and replace them with clean linen again, leave and come back, and same thing, looked like there had been blood on the sheets. Also, they saw what they claimed to be bloody footprints every now and then. They were, like I said, they were convinced that this entity was messing with them. There's another thing. It wasn't supernatural, but it was creepy enough for me. One of the smaller buildings that I had to patrol, there was a second floor to it. It was a small house, but there was a second floor, and after what I encountered, I refused to go up on the second floor after that. And like I said, it wasn't supernatural, but what it was at the top of the stairs is a painting, and it's a painting of a small cherub-like child, and it's one of those old paintings that the eyes follow you. It's an optical illusion, but in the dark with nothing but a flashlight, and I kept coming up on that, kept scaring the crap out of me every time. So eventually I just stopped going to the second floor. I'm in that building. And another thing is, it's different being a ghost hunter and then working at a job that is haunted. There's a very big difference. Because as a ghost hunter, you have the freedom to leave the area anytime you want. But when you work at a place, you can't leave until your shift is done. I mean, honestly, you can, but you probably won't have a job after that. So if you want to keep the job, you're pretty much stuck there until the end of your shift, and you have to deal with the paranormal if there is any. And this was kind of that case. Now, the main mansion that was on the property, now keep in mind, this was a mansion back in the Civil War days, so it's not as big as you would think a mansion is today. But it was more of a manor house. And we called it Apple Manor. And there was a lot of energy there because, ironically enough, like a few days before I got hired and started working on the property, there was a tree out behind Apple Manor, and it had been struck by lightning. And even several days later, the tree stump was smoking, and still you could see embers. It was still burning, but and one of my jobs was to keep an eye on it in case it flared up, and if it did, to call the authorities in the fire department. Now, everywhere on this property, in the buildings that is, I could feel things watching me. I could definitely feel presence. And ironically enough, the main building had books down on the first floor about the hauntings at that location for people to purchase. And another thing that was frightening but not supernatural was there was a cat that lived on the property outside the main house. And one of the things it liked to do was hide in the bushes until someone came by and then jump out at them. So in the middle of the night, when I'm approaching the building with just my flashlight and the lights on the outside of the buildings and it's dark out and the place is known to be haunted, and I have a cat jump out at me, it's quite startling. And I'm an animal lover, but I could have wrung that cat's neck for doing that. But like I said, occasionally things would move, like a chandelier or something, with no wind in the building, no windows open. Just little things. But like I said, I felt a presence watching me all the time. And I had heard the stories, which that didn't help because power of suggestion can make your mind wander and come up with stuff. However, there was one night in the main building when I felt the presence very, very strong, as if there was someone behind me. So I just stopped. I calmly said into the darkness, I said, look, I know you're here, and I know you know that I'm here. Now, as long as you don't do anything to scare me or wig me out, I will keep people out of here that you don't want here. So I made an agreement with the entities there, and although I could, even after that, I could still feel them watching me, they never bothered me. Unlike other staff members. But like I said, I made an agreement with them. And I didn't really work there for very long. I had other opportunities come up and I decided to take them. But that facility was definitely haunted. I could say for sure. But it makes sense. It's an old plantation from the Civil War days. Obviously, a lot of history went down on that property. People may have died and whatnot, especially servants. I wouldn't doubt that. But let me know what you think. Feel free to make comments, and if you know the place I'm talking about, I know I was very vague, but if you know the place I'm talking about, let me know in the comments. Okay, now this next story, again, I apologize, it's not about me ghost hunting, but it kind of gives you a little backstory on me and my sensitivity. This goes back to when I was a child. And it has to do, like I said, it has to do with my sensitivity, and I didn't realize what it was until I was older. But when I was around 2 years old, I had a little sister die of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, or its nickname, crib death. And so after for a year after her death, I had stopped talking, and my parents had me tested because they thought there might be something wrong. But come to find out, I was fine. And my current little sister was born about a year, like I said, a year after. And once she was born, I apparently started talking like nothing had happened. So we just chalked it all up as a coping mechanism. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because when I was a young child, my parents obviously grieved over the death of a child, which is no easy thing to do. And unfortunately, most parents who suffer the death of a child tend to part ways with each other. Luckily, from my family, my parents managed to stay together, and they grieved and mourned and supported each other. Now, having said that, when I was a child, for the longest time, I couldn't go in my parents' bedroom. Not only was that the room where my little sister passed away, but like I've said in past videos, I'm empathic. I pick up on emotions and what people are feeling. Well, the reason I couldn't go in my parents' room for the longest time was because I could feel their depression, their sadness in that room. It hung in there like, it's difficult to describe. It's like the very air was just thick with sadness and depression, thick enough you could cut it with a knife. And I could not be in my parents' room for longer than maybe 30 seconds to a minute before all I wanted to do was bawl my eyes out. I could feel that emotion, that grief. And I think part of it stemmed from it being the room my little sister died in, and I was picking up on my parents' emotions, their grief, their sadness, their depression, and I could feel it. It was so strong that I couldn't bear it. So for many, many years, I couldn't go into their bedroom at all. Now, after those years, it eventually went away once I believed my parents had come to terms with it and had managed to move past it. But that was one strong instance in my childhood of my empathy manifesting. Another time that my extrasensory perception kicked in, I believe I was in 4th or 5th grade at the time. My parents had called the elementary school I had gone to, told them that I needed to come home because I was within walking distance of my home, so I walked back and forth to school. That was back during the days when it was safe for children to do that. So they had called the school, told them I needed to come home. It was a family emergency. The school didn't tell me what happened. They just told me I needed to go home. I'm like, okay, that's odd, but okay. I was just a normal kid. I was like, I got to go out. I got to get out of school early, so I was all for it. Now, I was walking home. I was taking my shortcut I usually take, and all of a sudden, I just stopped and stood, and an awareness came over me, and I just said out loud to no one in particular, because there's no one around me, but I said out loud, Grandpa died. I didn't know why I knew that, but I knew it very strongly. So I finished walking home, and there's all these cars outside my home, and because a lot of family had shown up. And so I get in the house. There's a bunch of family members there. They sit me down in the chair, and my parents were like, "Now, do you know why we had you come home?" I looked right at my parents and I said, "Grandpa died, didn't he?" And they looked confused, and it was like, "How did you know that? Did they tell you?" I'm like, "No, I just knew." And honestly, it was one of those things where I knew without knowing why. Something just came over me, and awareness came over me, and I just blurted it out. I knew. Um, there were several times throughout my childhood that I can remember where odd things happened, but those two really stood out. I didn't really know or acknowledge my sensitivity until I was about 19 or 20, and I started really realizing that I could sense presences of ghosts and whatnot. And about 20, 21 years old, I started ghost hunting with my friends, and that's when I really started realizing the extent of my senses. So that's just a little background on me. And honestly, I would really like to know in the comments below if any of you all experience senses like that. How many of you can do it too? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there who can, but they just don't want to talk about it. I know I, for the longest time, had no idea what was going on with me. It scared me at times, and I really didn't talk about it with anybody because I didn't want to be looked at like a freak, or I didn't want to be looked at as if I was just telling people because I wanted attention or something like that. I mean, when you have people stare at you in disbelief, or some of the things they can say can be very hurtful and demeaning, and it's very hard sometimes to find people who understand and realize what you're going through and can relate to what you're going through. And I'm sure that those of you who can do it as well, you probably understand what I'm talking about. So I would love to hear from you down in the comments, or even email me. My email will be down in the description below. Like I said, I'd love to hear from you. So with that, if you would please like and subscribe, that would really help a lot. I really want to see the channel grow, and I'd really like to get a community of gamers, paranormal believers, and campers going. So thank you for watching, and have a spooky night.